Hello, everyone. We are starting. Yes. Look, it's 8 o'clock, right on time.
I have a
Look at this.
perfect show title for this episode.
We're professionals.
Gregg is completely clueless tonight.
No, the show title is 66. Winter operations are coming. It's a play on Game of Thrones. I just need to pull up said show notes. Yeah. See, this is what happens when you throw a podcast together in the last hour. Hello, Liz Piper. I take it your show is over.
Hello, Liz.
G'day.
Hey, Evan.
See, this showtime, while it might not be good for Europe, is really good for the Americas, like the South people. Trying to figure out. Oh yeah, that A220 BBJ, that one, sick looking airplane.
Mm-hmm. Flew on the A220. Did I mention that last time? I can't remember. When was last time? Okay, good.
The last time was without Gregg, and we had your cat replace him.
Oh yes, that's right.
Much better co-host.
You guys,
cuter, fluffier, not as loud.
Sheds less.
and I was gonna say, and somebody that's just as hairy as me, or hairier, or I don't know.
Oh fudge, that's funny as hell.
A220 Boeing to move all 787 to South Carolina. Where are they now? Are they?
They're mixed between Painfield and Charleston.
Oh. Okay.
So now you're going to be the one who has to explain that.
Yeah, that's up for you.
Sure.
I mean, you're qualified to dispatch the damn airplane. Shouldn't you know where it's made?
I'm not qualified for anything right now.
No, you're still qualified. You're just not allowed
current.
To do it. No, he's still current.
Oh yeah, I guess that's true. I'm not current.
I mean, Acme North could call him back right now, and he'd be like, "Okay, sure."
Actually, I am still employed until the end of the month, so I actually have 4 shifts scheduled that I picked up at the end of the month. So.
That's good news. That's longer than you were thinking, wasn't it?
It was supposed to be the end of or beginning of October, but in order for us to be able to vote on the letter of agreement, they had to keep us active for another month.
Yeah, there you go.
With no pay, though. That's the only caveat.
Unless you work.
Unless you pick up shifts from somebody or pick up overtime.
Mm-hmm.
All right, who's ready to start?
You want me to read a disclaimer this time?
Well, Joe did it last time.
Okay, then I guess I'm doing it.
All right, let's see. We're ready. That's a lot of electrical hum. Oh, it's Joe.
It's the shitty headsets.
Well, dang it. Maybe we should buy some new ones.
Yeah, right. now that I've got a good job, I probably should.
No, I was saying, like, I don't know. Maybe we need to get you an ATR 4200 or 7200 or...
Man, I have the nice Bose noise-canceling headsets for flying. I just wish I knew how to plug them into the computer.
Yeah, we need to get you a nice ATR 2100. Right, Greg?
That's right.
It comes with a stand, too. It sits there right on
Yeah,
the
I know.
desk.
Well,
really
if you
cute.
saw what my office looks like right now, it should be condemned. So no.
Well, my wife says that I was in a crap hole. Apparently, we're disclaimed from Capital.
Probably because Gregg didn't wear the shirt.
Yeah, if Gregg was wearing an APU shirt, we wouldn't be disclaimed.
That's right.
I put my daughter down this afternoon and something popped in my back, and it's not very fun.
Phrasing.
All right, are we ready to start a show?
Let's go. Tell me
when.
When. All right, here we go. The Flying in Life podcast is produced to promote aviation and the dispatch career. The hosts of the show do not represent their employers, and the show is used for awareness and entertainment only. All facts on the show can be found in the public domain, and there is no inside information being used to produce the show. Please do not get us fired.
Please don't get Mike fired.
That would be a true statement.
Flying Life Podcast, episode 66, recorded October 9th, 2020. Welcome to the Flying Life podcast just about that, flying, aviation, and our lives. I'm Dispatcher Mike, a dispatcher for a major airline based here in the United States. Joining me this episode is Dispatcher Joe, a dispatcher for a major airline based in Canada, and Dispatcher Gregg, a dispatcher for a major airline based also in the United States. For now, Joe. How's it been going since the last show?
You know, it's been going pretty well. Got the COVID job, the Corona job that's helping tide me over till things get better, and yeah, I'm glad the military's decided to keep me around full time.
That's a good thing. I'm glad you have that as a great backup option career. Because trust me, if Acme decided to tell Dispatcher Mike to go take a heat walk off of a cliff, I don't know what I would do.
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky. The folks at the new unit are all pretty awesome, so it's been great.
Wonderful. Gregg, are you still employed?
Well,
many people would like to know.
Well, since you all ditched me on the last show, I guess I have to catch everyone up a little bit.
I believe you ditched us for money.
Yeah. Well, that is true. I picked up some overtime because, I had to pocket some furlough money there. So to answer your question, yes, I am still employed technically on paper. Our union had a letter of agreement that came out with the company that would have kept our jobs through at least the next 15 months with no furloughs. It did not pass. Well, let me even step back a little bit for that. In order for us to be able to vote, the company and the union would have to extend our furlough date from October 1st through the end of October, because you can't be inactive and vote. So they extended our furlough till the end of the month, but at no pay status. The vote did not pass, so that means come November 1st, I will be on furlough unless the government steps in and play nice and give money to the airlines, but not relying on that. So on paper, I am furloughed, but we are able to pick up some overtime and pick up shifts through this month. So on my scheduled days off, I can pick up a couple days, and I do have some scheduled days at the end of the month. So,
I think that's the most ridiculous thing ever. We're not going to pay you, but if you were not scheduled to be here, go ahead. You can work for time and a half.
That's right. You could still pick up the overtime. And if you're paying out overtime, that means you don't have enough people. So, but you're furloughing people. So
I don't get it.
Yeah, but you know what? I'll take the overtime if they're going to call me for it. I'll absolutely take it. And the people want to give up their hours right now, the senior people. Hey, I'll take your hours. So rack it up, because come November I'll be working in a warehouse somewhere or flipping burgers.
And all you need now is for someone to sabotage the generators and the Big Willie again, or some flood to happen, or some social unrest to happen, and then boom, here comes the overtime money in Elk Grove.
Yeah, so there's some stuff going on with that too, and with the political stuff coming up in November with the election, they're already talking that Willis probably will not be, or our downtown facility will not be
Open on election night.
For a couple days, because they're anticipating some demonstrations in the area.
Why not?
So it may be a short recall. Who knows? They may realize that after, oh crap, we can't run this with the people that we have. We need to call people back. So I'm about 35 to get called back. So mentally, I'm thinking 6 months, hopefully less, but could be more. Depends.
That's the difference between two airlines, because I'm working. I got an overtime shift beginning of September. I got one in the second half of September. I have one in the first half of October. So I'm starting my nice track of having one overtime shift per pay period, and it's kind of the difference between two companies, and the two, even though it's the same international union, the difference between two unions and two companies and two ways like that, where Gregg's facing furlough, and there's a bottom 100 and
155.
Yeah, 155 there at Acme North, and we as a union took a consolidated cut, and to save people through January 1st, 2021. No,
I thought it was until
22.
Yeah,
all through next year.
How do I know your agreement better than you do?
Well, if I was at the bottom, I'd probably know my agreement a lot better, but I'm in the upper third now, so life is great. And James asks a great question: is the furlough indefinite? And that's a great thing, and that's how different companies would work. So for our contract down at Acme, pretty sure your contract, Gregg, up at Acme North, is no. As soon as they start needing to hire people, they legally have to take back from the furlough list, and you have to go and recall people from furlough before you could hire anyone new into the union or onto the seniority list.
There is a cap on that. There is, at least in our agreement, it's 8 years. So as long as it's within 8 years, you would be subject to be called back.
I don't know if there's a cap in ours.
But obviously, hoping
I've never had to look at the furlough section of the contract, so I'm not sure.
I'm very well versed on ours, so.
Joe, what about you and up there in Acme, Canada? Is that the same way?
Ours is a little complicated right now, and I can't really talk about it because it's still being worked on.
Complicated, still being worked on. Sounds like most things in the aviation world right now. Complicated.
That's an awfully big book.
This is a great, and honestly, it's not too bad of a contract. I mean, you look at the pilot contracts and things like that. This isn't that thick. It's I think 26 sections and a couple of side letters in the back. Not too bad. But that's intriguing. I should probably understand my contract a little bit better, but it's up here on a shelf, and when we need it, we pull it down, and when we don't need it, which is pretty much any time in the length of the contract, it's up there.
Yeah, it's when you're working in a union position, it's good to know what they can and cannot do. So, especially for reduction in force, all that kind of stuff. Over the coming months, I probably have read the contract probably about 30 times, and I'm still reading it every night thinking, is there a loophole here somewhere where I can find to keep my job?
Yeah, there's
probably not.
If you can find a loophole in that, you probably shouldn't be a dispatcher. You should be a lawyer.
That would be true.
Yeah, that would be a cool thing. So yeah, I don't know. It doesn't exactly say real easily.
But
In
I
our
will add,
contract.
and this will apply hopefully. There's the government airline bailout thing that that's kind of ongoing. So if they come up with an airline relief bill, this goes away and my furlough goes away, and I'd be retroactively paid October 1st, and that would go through till March 31st of next 2021, and then we'll start this whole thing over again. So
Yeah,
go government.
it's the government. It's an election year and things like that. And I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Yeah, it's not a political show,
Yeah.
but
Alrighty, so that covers up on this. In this episode, we're going to talk about we'll follow up on Steve Dixon flying the 737 Max, a new airspace pack in the Middle East, which I came out yesterday. It's very intriguing. A move to Boeing moving all the 787s down to South Carolina. The A220 BBJ. I mean, I don't really like BBJ because that stands for Boeing Business Jet. A new business jet modification or design for the Airbus A220. And then I don't know what happened. I lost everything. Increases for the 339 Iceland Air with some 757s and the 10,000th serial number, the master MSN number, the master serial number for the A220 family hits 10,000. So it goes from a 4-digit to a 5-digit MSN number there. And then for the topic, we're going to talk about winter operations, and that's it's coming. Winter is coming, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere. All of you folks in the Southern Hemisphere, well, winter came, winter went, winter conquered. Happy spring. But not so much for us up here. We got snow, ice, snowstorms, de-icing, runway conditions, a whole bunch of other stuff that we're going to talk about there. And then in the feedback, we're going to talk a little bit about commuting. I got a question about commuting on the Twitters that we'll cover. So you want to cover that? One of you two?
Yeah.
well, I can talk about my 52-mile commute.
No, I was talking about the question that got popped up there.
I'll pop it back up. Honestly, for me, I just found the airlines I wanted to work for, and I set up a job alert on their website.
Yeah, that's basically what I was going to say too. Any airline that you see, usually dispatch jobs are usually found on the company website under careers, and going there under the under those job boards, usually under flight operations or something like that, is where you will find the dispatch job. Some airlines call them flight superintendents, some call them global somethings, and there's some different things. But usually if you search the word dispatch or dispatcher or dispatch certificate, you'll find the ones that require the dispatch certificate.
There is a website out there called Jet Careers. I don't know if anyone's been on there, but jetcareers.com, there's a whole dispatch section on there, and usually when there's jobs, they'll post them on there and requirements and so forth.
And also a good plug for the ADF, the Airline Dispatch Federation, also has a career page and also has a job board, and it's always a good place to figure out who's hiring. And even still right now in the pandemic, and passenger airlines being laid off, I do have friends who are dispatchers who got laid off from the passenger carrier, but now are getting hired as a cargo carrier. So it's out there. There are openings. You just gotta look for them.
Yeah, and make sure that you are legally able to work in the country that you're applying for before you apply, probably, unless they say they're going to sponsor. I've been bit by that a couple of times, so just because you want to go move to Australia doesn't mean that they want you.
That would be a very good point, and something I never had to consider. So thanks for bringing that up, Joe. That's us people that live in just south of you, in the country south of you, we're all very us centric. So we usually just keep looking at us.
Yeah, my backup of going to work for Aeromexico looks like that's going down the tubes. So yeah, there you go.
No es bueno. All right, let's get started with the as I munch on some ice here, as I will edit this out in post. And so yeah, we will get started with the news, which means I'm going to hit this button right here. The first story in the news is a bit of a little follow on from what we talked about in the last episode when Steve Dixon was going to fly the 737 MAX, but this time Steve Dixon flew the 737 MAX. I believe he went through the training that Boeing was suggesting that he needed to go through, and he also went through some sim sessions, and then went up and I think he flew 2.5, 3 hours in the jet as well, and said he was comfortable with the MAX systems, but insisted that the agency will only certify the jet when it's fully convinced it's safe. And there's a lot of pre-work that needs to go ahead with the jet, and some more digits have to be looked at, basically.
Did he already have a 737 type rating?
That would be a good question, and I'm sure the research department will get right on that and tell us. So why don't we talk about it a little bit more, and I'll figure that one out.
Yeah, just because I'm thinking if he's thinking about it from a research point of view, he would need to know the difference in the delta between this 37 type rating and the new proposed training for it to be intelligible. If he's an A320 pilot and he goes and sits in a day and a half of ground school for the MAX, and it wouldn't make sense. So I'm just wondering if that's if he's got that type rating or not. And also, hello, TAS Aircraft Dispatch School in Miami.
Hello.
Greetings.
There's a lot of Steve Dixons.
You would think he would be logically, but
yeah, like he could be rated on anything, though, right?
I mean, right. I mean, if you're going to fly it. And he likes what he saw, so he knew what he was looking at, right?
I will say it's kind of nice to have the head of the FAA actually be a pilot and be a card-carrying airman and things like that. So,
see, that's always a little bit complicated. So, like at Transport Canada, all of the inspectors are pilots. So the dispatch inspector is a pilot. The mechanics have to have a mechanic certificate, but the flight attendant inspector, pilot. So, you get the pilots come in, they have no clue what dispatch does, because they're usually Air Force people or they work for charters. Some of them have airline experience, but it's hard for them to inspect a dispatcher when they're not a dispatcher. So I just find that kind of curious. I don't know if it's like that in the US with your guys' inspectors, but for us it's mostly pilots. I think there's one in all of Canada that's a dispatcher, maybe two now. So
I don't believe they all are dispatchers.
Let's see. Mr. Dixon holds a type rating for the A320, Boeing 737, Boeing 757, and Boeing 767. So, yes, he holds a type rating for the 737. He also holds a flight engineer certificate and a airline transport pilot for a airplane multi-engine land. Circulating approach is VMC only. Same thing with that's the only limitations is any circulating approach must be done VMC. But yes, so he is in the Airman Registry database, and yes, he holds a type rating for the 737.
Cool.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Well, then he is. So then it is a credible information since he is certified. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, and that's a really good question because it is a credible thing for him to actually go through and actually um, be very proficient in the aircraft as well, having had a type rating in it prior. Um, the next story is also from Flight Global, and that is Israeli Jordan airspace pact sets to unlock more Middle Eastern routes. Uh, Greg, Joe, have you guys ever dispatched any airplanes in or through the Middle East?
Yes.
Only in my flight simulator.
So
Yes.
there's always been a time where you can't, if you leave Israel, you can't fly through Jordanian airspace, or you can't fly through Jordanian airspace and then fly through Israeli airspace. That was always a big no. Like they wouldn't allow it. And
Yeah, like there's one airway into Tel Aviv, right? Like there's one airway in and out. It's a straight line from the middle of the Med. Yeah,
pretty much.
I remember there were some flights from like Saudi Arabia to Israel that they were scheduled at 3 hours of flying time, but that's because they had to fly around Jordanian airspace to get there.
yeah.
And you know what this also means? Means more money for them because they can charge more money for people to fly through their airspace.
Yeah, overflight charges are ridiculous in a lucrative amount. So it's more money for Jordan, it's more money for Israel, it's more money for everybody. So it's good.
But if it saves time on routes, it could be profitable for the airlines too. So you
Well,
have to
it definitely save fuel. Like look at Air Seychelles. They fly from the Seychelles to Tel Aviv, and they'd have to fly all through Egypt and come around from the west. So that's a long flight to do an A320. Plus, look at the guys flying down like the London Heathrow to Perth kind of route. If the winds were that way, that might open up a new route for them. Same thing with Europe to Sri Lanka, southern India.
Yeah, our standard routing out of Tel Aviv usually goes out to the west over Turkey, and then through Turkey and then up through like Germany, and then whether it goes up north, up over Greenland, or straight out west, depends on the winds and all that. But so.
Yeah, the Israeli government says that this airspace agreement is the successful conclusion of negotiations that began several years ago. And they also said flights operated by the UAE and Bahraini carriers will now be able to overfly Israel and proceed to their destinations, leading to significant fuel savings, says the Israeli government. And that ain't no understatement. By significant fuel savings, they mean a lot of fuel savings. Anything from the UAE up to Europe always went either over Saudi and Egypt or up north through the Persian Arabian Gulf through over Iraq into through Turkey to get up into the Europe, mainland Europe.
Yeah, I'll be very interested to see if they add more airways in between the two FIRs, because right now there's one airway in and one airway out, and that's the only way you can cross between the one FIR to the other, and that's straight over Tel Aviv and Jerusalem.
Yeah, it looks like there's two as I'm looking at Sky Vector. There's one direction and one the other direction, but both go pretty much right over the top of Tel Aviv. And there's a couple of airways that branch south. But they're one-way airways over each direction, and so it'll be intriguing to see, like you said, if there's some extra structure built in to help support these routes as well.
Yeah, I wonder how EasyJet gets to Aqaba, because they would have to fly through Israel to get there, presumably, unless they come in through Egypt somehow. Anyway, that's academic.
well, pretty soon they'll just be able to fly straight there.
Yeah, you know what would be great is if they just got rid of all the airways like Germany and it's all random routes.
Yes.
There you go.
Free route airspace, which is another total bag of worms in there as well. Anyway, Joe, you want to talk about the next one?
Sure. So, much to the a certain Al-Bakr of Qatar's chagrin, I'm sure, Boeing is planning to move all 787 production to South Carolina. So that's a let me actually pop the link up here. But it's pretty big news because of all of the complaints about quality coming out of South Carolina. So they're saying that that it's due to coronavirus. They're going to end production in Seattle and move, and of course that's the union production as well, and then they're going to move it all to South Carolina. Fortunately, the rest of that article is behind a paywall, but yeah. So that's going to be very interesting to see what happens, because there's a lot of airlines that are reluctant to take aircraft out of South Carolina due to the production issues. So we'll see, and I'm sure the unions in Seattle are going to be fighting that tooth and nail. So unless they get something better, like maybe an NMA or something.
Yeah, it's and I believe they even said that they're going to be out of there by the middle of next year, so mid 2021. All production will be out of Boeing in Seattle and back down to South Charleston for production. And this has ripple effects. Yes, that it takes away all the jobs out of Seattle, but that also takes away the needs really for the Dreamlifter to be flying sections from Charleston up to Payne Field. So it both ways it's not great both ways. I mean,
well, Dreamlifter will still have plenty of work taking wings from Italy and components and rear sections from Japan. So
that's true.
Still plenty of work for those guys. There's only 4 of them, so.
Yeah, super modified 747s. The Dreamlifter is. Let's see. I logged in the Wall Street Journal. Boeing said in July that it was studying options to handle the slowdown for the 787, and then that a lot of people aren't really surprised by this, and I think we even said it on the last podcast. We wouldn't be surprised if everything gets moved to South Carolina. But I'll go back and say it. There's non-labor unions down in Charleston versus union labor in Washington, and that which one is cheaper. We always know that the non-union labor is generally cheaper.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see if airlines start canceling 787 orders because of it. Like, there are several CEOs, like the notorious one from Qatar, who vowed to never take a 87 from Charleston. So whether that'll hold true or not, and they'll pull the plug on the 87 and get the 350 or the 330 Neo or something to replace it, it'd be very interesting to see if that actually holds true, or if that was just a bunch of BS.
Yeah, it is. It is going to be interesting to see. Thankfully, my airline doesn't fly any of the airplanes or have any on order, so I'm good.
Yeah, the 350 is much more comfortable. I'll never fly an 87 unless I'm in business class. It's just sucky.
Hey, the 787 is a beautiful airplane. It really is, but
787 looks like somebody took a 777, hit it in the nose with a frying pan, snapped the wings so they're all fucked up, and then squeezed the tube so that you can't sit in it comfortably.
Hey, Mike, are we gonna fix that in post?
Oh, we'll be hitting the beep button on that one. Yep.
Yeah, tell me how you really feel, Joe.
Where's that family show button?
That's on another podcast, but we have this one. We'll just hit this. Oh, it's not working. You're lucky.
Oh, wow.
You gotta do like Metalocalypse and do like the major 7th.
Just tell us how you really feel now. We get it.
Yeah, Joe. How do you really feel about the 787? I thought it was a beautiful airplane.
No, but you know what? I have very unpopular opinions with my colleagues about airplanes. Like the 747 is a hunchback, the A380 looks like a whale, and the 757 looks like a pencil on toothpicks.
Especially the 300. 300 is a flying pencil.
Yeah, it's ridiculous looking. I mean,
all right.
That doesn't say anything about the technical capabilities of any of these aircraft. I'm just saying they look stupid. And also, the 787 is really uncomfortable if you're flying down the back.
But it is very efficient. That's all I'll say.
Oh, yeah, no question.
All right, Greg, you want to take the next one?
Okay, so the next one is the new A220 ACJ deal signed, and it's also under a paywall, but you can see the pictures there, and it's
I fixed it for you.
Oh, you did?
Well, Boeing the ACJ, because you were complaining about it being a BBJ. It's not.
ACJ.
Yes, it's an ACJ. That's what Airbus calls them. So I fixed that.
Oh, you did. Okay, gotcha. Pictures are pretty neat of it. It looks like well, it's a VIP business jet, so it almost comes to mind like an Air Force One type layout. You got a bed, you got like a whole living area in there. It's very luxurious travel on there. Looks like they're gonna have 100 Airbus suppliers are looking like they're gonna put that out there. But I can't pull up the article though.
Yeah, so the interesting thing here is it's not the A220-300, it's the A220-100, which a lot of people are wondering if that model is going to stick around because people seem to be not ordering it. They're preferentially ordering the 300 over the 100. The 100's got a hell of a lot of range, and they're throwing 5 fuel tanks down the belly. So they're saying it's going to have 10,500 kilometers of range. So that'll do London to LA easily. That'll do, London to India or basically wherever you need to go. And when you consider that that's like basically just a little bit bigger than an ERJ, that's a pretty long way to go in a small little plane. Yeah, so I think it shows to me that Airbus is still planning on keeping that frame going. They're not planning to just let it fade off.
So. I'm assuming this will be ETOP certified and all that.
They're all ETOPs out of the box.
Well, it'll be Part 91, so it wouldn't have to be ETOP certified. If it's, in the United States, it's a business jet, so,
yeah,
theoretically.
I thought the A220 was coming ETOPS 180 out of the box.
It has the option to be ETOPS 180 out of the box, but again, like all airliners, you have to pay for said option for that to be true. So
it's a pretty looking plane, though.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's kind of nice, and having some experience with the aircraft, it's got a lot of range. I mean, it can go far with 110 people, and now you're having to go far with 19 people. So there's a lot less people on board, which means you have a lot more payload. Yes, your furnishings might be a little bit heavier, but not 110 people heavier. So it's really good for the aircraft.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're carrying that many people, that's pretty fuel efficient too, for a jet of that size. Because you think about it, your next biggest option, other than like the big Embraers and the Lears, is like the A319. So it fills kind of that gap in between the big T-tail jets and the. Though I guess there's always the ERJ business jet too.
Right. Yeah. All right, from Simply Flying, EASA approves a 9-ton increase that'd be a metric ton increase in the A330-900 max takeoff weight. So basically, this is taking the A330-900 from 242 metric tons to 251 metric tons. It might be a small thing, but that's a big deal. I mean, anytime you can get some more weight on the max takeoff weight is a good deal. And if we're going to talk about airplanes, the A330-900, it looks like the 330-300 and the 350 got together in the hangar one night, and this is the byproduct of it.
Yeah, I've always liked flying on the 330. It's a pretty comfortable plane.
Yeah, 330. Yeah. Great aircraft. So yeah, this means the 330 Neos can be more flexible than ever to meet their current and future requirements, says the 330 chief engineer. So that's a good.
And that helps the 330 to compete even bit more against the 787, which is its basic direct Airbus competitor or Boeing competitor. So some drama going on.
There's no drama. It's okay, Greg. It's fine. She just wants to see where her dad is. Jeez.
Daddy is doing a podcast.
Oh, jeez. Alrighty. Let's skip down to... Which one do we want to do next? Is there anything major left in the news before we move on?
Icelandair is scrapping 4, selling 3, and storing 9 of their 757s. And they were a big MAX orderer. So as the Maxes are coming online, maybe they're flexing their capacity, getting rid of the older 757s. Though, if you'll follow the old joke, I don't think the Max is going to carry nearly as much fish.
Yeah, that's funny, but yeah. So, it to me, scrapping, selling, and storing aircraft in this time frame isn't that big of a deal right now. It's just in my opinion. Everyone's doing it. Everyone's juggling their fleets to try to deal with what the market is trying to tell them is going to happen.
Yeah, like if any airline, like we were talking about last time about, will airlines want the MAX? If there's any airline that's going to, it's going to be Icelandair, because that's going to right size their capacity and it's going to have more efficient fuel burn compared to their 757s and 767s. So yeah, for those guys for sure, I could see wanting to keep taking deliveries of Maxes, whether other airlines do or not.
Well, I'm sure other airlines will. It's inevitable. It's like we talked about last time. It's like the DC-10. People will get on it, and the airlines will fly it. Let's
And
do.
I think a lot of airlines are actually going to change the name of them because they don't really want to be calling it the Max from a public perception.
I
But
think
anyway, it is
Boeing's
the
going to
Max.
change the name of them.
But
No, I agree with you. All right. Airbus delivers the 10,000th MEA, 10,000th 320 family aircraft to the MEA. Airbus sent the 10,000 MSN 10,000 on its way to a customer. It's a big deal. I mean, 10,000 aircraft. I don't think this is the 10,000th delivery. It's just the 10,000th MSN number.
Yeah, because of course all of their testbed aircraft and all of that stuff would also have a serial number, so they're still in the 9,000s of deliveries, from what I recall.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it's a big deal. It's a milestone, but man, it's 10,000 A320 family aircrafts. I mean, you could probably take a couple of halves off there for the 318s because that's like a half of 320. But it's still a lot of airplanes.
Good return on investment for that initial aircraft type.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that's going to wrap up the news. And let's go ahead and hit this button over here and start talking about winter. All right, our colleague in the frozen north had the idea of talking about winter operations. Here I am still sitting in shorts and t-shirt and flip-flops because it's not winter yet. But he keeps on telling me winter is coming and it's cold up there. And most of the leaves are probably almost off the trees and it's cold up there. So, Joe, why don't you hit it?
Yeah, I'll just clarify. This is the first day that I've worn not shorts and added a hoodie. So we're going down below freezing starting on Sunday for our overnight lows, which I can't wait because winter is awesome. Okay, so we wanted to talk about winter ops. So when you're talking about winter ops, there's a bunch of things you need to consider, but of the big ones, the first one is de-icing. So that's any time when you're sitting on the ground and they're spraying the fluid on the airplane. So then the next would be runway conditions. So, it snows, it ices, it gets slippery. There's some special operations that we do at airports in winter, and then the third one would be airborne icing. It's a hazard in the summer too with thunderstorms, but in the wintertime you can definitely get that severe mixed and rime icing in the big storms. So icing is another big issue that we confront in the wintertime. And then there's also a slightly small but not always insignificant 5-pound increase in standard passenger weights according to regulations once you flip into winter. Though, of course, that also depends on where you're flying. At least for Acme Canada, if you're going north of San Francisco, it's summer weights the whole time. So if you're going down to the Caribbean, it's summer weights, even if you're leaving Canada or coming back to Canada. So yeah, I guess we should start off talking about de-icing. So is anyone here a resident expert on de-icing? Ever was a ramp guy?
I was never a ramp guy. I'm one of those snobs that always worked in the operations and never went out onto the ramp. Let's see, de-icing. Some guy sits in a bucket in freezing cold and sprays hot liquid onto the airplane that smells and does not taste like maple syrup, and I get to go take off.
Sounds like a good description.
It's very concise.
I was not I was not a ramper either, so I can't talk about being in said bucket and said spraying stuff on airplanes.
All right, well, I guess I'll talk about it then, because I work with a lot of guys who were rampers. So basically, there's two major types of de-icing that we do. The first is called Type 1, and the purpose of Type 1 is to take any snow or ice that is on the aircraft. So say you're out overnight and it's snowing, and then there's snow on the wings and tail and critical areas, because it's not always the wings and tail. If you're working a rear-engined aircraft, it's also the top of the fuselage, and propellers if you're wearing a propeller, blah blah blah. There's different areas, but generally wings and tail for most jets are the obvious ones. So you've got snow and ice on the wings and tail. You spray it with Type 1. That is hot fluid that's warmed up, and its purpose is to remove all of that contamination. So that's what that's good for. And if it's not snowing anymore, usually you only need the Type 1 to be able to get off out of there. So you remove the snow that's on the wing, off you go. So the principle for icing is, it's got to be the way it was built. So wings have to be completely clean of snow, frost, whatever, with certain exceptions for cold soaked fuel frost in certain areas. But generally, you need it to be the way it rolled out of the factory for it to be certified. So Type 1 will get you the clean wings. And then Type 4 is what we'll put on after the Type 1, and that is the green fluid. So Type 1 is kind of yellow, and then or green, and then Type 4, is orange. Type 4 is what stops ice from forming on the wing. So they'll spray the Type 4 on, it sits like a coating on the wing and protects it, so as snow falls into it, it can't stick to the wing. And then when you take off around 80 knots, it's designed to shear off of the wing so that, again, your wing is clean, because the de-ice fluid is also a contaminant, so your wings have to be clean for takeoff. So as you accelerate down the runway, it shears off, wings are clean, snow can't stick to it, you're moving too fast, off you go. So that's kind of the principles of de-icing. Now, it gets a little more complicated, because those fluids only last for a certain amount of time before they're no good anymore, particularly the Type 4. So depending on the snowfall intensity, so if it's snowing a little few flakes here or there, you may be able to sit on the ground with that on your wings without them being contaminated for an hour and a half. But if it's like pelting down snow and hail and ice, that might only last you 20 minutes to 15 minutes, 10 minutes, or not even at all. So there are definitely times where you cannot actually de-ice the aircraft because it's either too cold or it's too snowy, and the fluid just isn't certified to keep your wings clean. So when it comes to ground icing, again, the big principle is you got to have the airplane be the way it rolled out of the factory to go flying. So you got to get all of that snow, ice, and frost off of the aircraft. We do that with Type 1 to remove and Type 4 to prevent ice forming on the wings. That's my Cole's notes.
I'm sitting here playing with our on the company laptop, playing or iPad. Well, no, now you can't see it. Never mind. Playing with our Acme holdover time application, and you can choose your city. It'll download the latest METAR and fill in the holdover time app. You select what type of fluid you want for a holdover time. It's even got a nice little timer in here, so you can hit the button, say what time you want the holdover time to start. Because remember, holdover time starts when they actually start spraying the aircraft, not when they are done spraying the aircraft. And it kind of gives you. And then you have a time range. I don't know, Greg, if you have this at Acme North, if you guys have it up in Canada. But we have a time range. We have, like, for Type 4, say it's -1C and moderate snow in let's just say we're in Calgary, because it always snows in Calgary. You have 30 minutes for a holdover time, and then you can go up to 61 minutes. And I believe the 30 to 61 minute range with the Type 4 is where you need a pre-departure contamination check by Willie. Your first officer over there goes back and peeks out the window, looks at the wings. If everything looks good, you're good to go. If not, nope, back to the de-ice pad for you. Do you guys do that too?
Absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's the same.
Transport Canada actually developed an app that does this because they used to publish holdover times, and now they've just said we can just automate this. So at certain airports, Acme Canada has actually contracted a company that has a weather station that tells you accurate holdover times based off of the actual conditions that are occurring and the actual precipitation type that's falling. So it's super accurate. It'll tell you, like your holdover time right now with this weather conditions is 53 minutes. So before 53 minutes, good to go. After 53 minutes, mandatory de-ice. So it's only at the stations that don't have that fancy equipment that we use the tables and have the ranges and with the inspections and stuff like that too.
And it's similar over at Acme North in terms of that we have an outside vendor that does the holdover tables or the holdover times. They plug in the similar thing, the temperature, the type of precipitation. Actually, you don't even need to plug it in. They just download it from the current METAR, and it'll give them the automated holdover time. And it goes straight to the ACARs. Dispatch really does not. We'll get a copy of the report, but we don't actually action anything. We'll just monitor it, and it's really the pilots, the captain and the first officer, that will make the assessment as to how long the holdover is.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that has slowly shifted from a dispatch function to a automation function. So before we would have pilots, ACARs, us saying, hey, we're seeing this, can you just back up our numbers, which totally cool. But now, again, they just send an ACARs or they look it up through their iPad and then they can go with that. And now we're mostly looking at it in terms of like a global strategy, of how much de-ice fuel we're going to be putting on, what's the plan commercially with alternates and blah, 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 because last thing you want to do is put a plane in an alternate where they can't de-ice because the weather's too shitty,
We'll commonly get the question from a captain saying, look at the report and it says no holdover time is available. And you look at the METAR, it's heavy snow or, some crazy, ridiculous temperature with precipitation. And you have to explain to the captain, well, there really is no holdover time because of the conditions that are out there.
Yeah.
You either need to do a wing check if it's heavy snow. Yeah, you need to do a wing check there, and you just. But if there is no holdover time, there is no holdover time. You can't go.
The fluids can only be certified to do so much, and there are certain kind of edge cases of winds, temperatures, and precipitation types where they just don't work. Like they're not good enough to give you the protection you need to assure a safe takeoff. So, and it's funny for us in Canada. Now, this may be apocryphal, but this is the story that we're told. The reason that there are dispatchers in Canada is due to the Air Ontario crash in Dryden. So basically, the captain wanted to de-ice. They had the AP was busted. They couldn't shut down one of the engines. They were burning their fuel. They were tankered. There was no fuel available. The company basically talked the captain into taking off without de-icing, and then they crashed. And I think it was the same sort of thing for you guys. So they established a position in Canada, the dispatcher, to be the go-between between the commercial pressure and the pilot. And we're the ones who share operational control, and we can fight on the ground for the crew and shut the operation down legally. We were given that authority. And I think it was the same thing with you guys. Wasn't there a crash in LaGuardia or somewhere? There was a de-icing crash that caused it for you guys too, wasn't it?
Well, the de-icing, there was a de-icing crash, Palm 90 out of DCA was the big one that really got into de-icing. But the dispatch job really started back a ways when there was Connie and something came together over the Grand Canyon, and that's kind of when dispatchers got started.
Actually, a pretty good video out there if anybody wants to watch it on one of those air disaster films of the one that you were just talking about, the Palm out of DCA. In fact, we had to watch it in one of our recurrent classes, but it goes into step by step of the de-icing and what happened and why that airplane crashed. So,
yeah, there's an air crash investigation about Air Ontario as well.
So I'm sitting here playing with so our new holdover guidelines just got published a couple of weeks ago, and I'm kind of sitting here. Things I remember from the holdover charts is one, the snow holdover chart changed a couple of years ago, where you couldn't just go based off of what the METAR was saying, light or heavy or moderate snow. It got changed into if it was daytime or nighttime, and then the visibility. So, for example, if I go into say it's snowing here, and if it's we'll call it -1 centigrade, and the snowfall intensity, um, we'll call it a meter in meters for our international friends, but it's 800 meters during the day. That's moderate snow. But if it's 800 meters visibility at nighttime, that's heavy snow now. And so in the daytime, that you're going to have 27 to 53 minutes for your holdover chart during for that snowfall. But in the nighttime, that's going to fall dramatically because now you have heavy snow, and you might only have a couple of um I'm trying to get to work. Heavy snow, this is what it says. Type 4 required, heavy snow, cabin check required within 5 minutes of takeoff. That it doesn't even give a time. It just says you got to check it before takeoff. So you'll also notice with de-icing and most of the airports that are north of I'll call it Indianapolis, Denver, and anything north, anywhere where they have relatively large amounts of snow, you're going to have the de-ice pads are right at the end of the runway. So you reduce the amount of time it takes for an aircraft to get out of the de-ice pad and, off to the runway. Theoretically. Joe's laughing at that.
Yeah, the central de-ice facilities in Canada are not always optimally located. It's more of a we have a corner of the airport here that nobody else wants, so let's pave it and stick the ice down there. Yeah.
I can say the airport in Chicago is similar to that. It's kind of a cluster when they have to de-ice. They did start it used to be at the gate, and then I think last year, maybe it was 2 years ago, they came out with this de-ice pad, and there's a line when there's snowing. There's a line all the way down.
When you're waiting to de-ice out of somewhere like Toronto, if it's a bad snow day, you could be putting on 5 or 6 hours of ground fuel because it can be that and there have been times where planes just turn around after 12 hours waiting to de-ice and they cancel. That's on the big meltdown days out of places like Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver. Oh my God, Vancouver! There's a flake of snow and the whole city shuts down. But this year, the last year actually, they shut down Calgary. Calgary was one of the major de-ice at the gates, and they've turned it into a CDF. And that's interesting because the CDFs tend to have better throughput, but you're taxiing for longer and you're waiting for longer generally. You're just waiting with the engines on versus the engines off. So it's catch-22 in Calgary because you couldn't push back because you needed to de-ice, which means planes can get on the gate. Whereas now they can sort of smooth that out by having you drive all over the airport. But now the gate's open, so the next guy can come in and out.
Yeah, I'm looking at the airport in Chicago, and that central de-icing facility is right in the middle. I mean, it's central, but it's nowhere near any of the runways. I'm thinking of great airports like Minneapolis, Detroit. There's one or two. Denver's pretty decent, where the de-ice pads are right by the end of the runway. But shoot, I mean, Minneapolis recycles. I think like 90% of the glycol gets collected and gets recycled and then gets reused. And Minneapolis, St. Paul was MSP was built that way. Detroit also, we have the pads right at the end of the runway. So I was a little off saying airports in the north have pads right at the end of the runway. I'm just used to operating in hubs where the pads are right at the end of the runway, and maybe that's an Acme thing.
Yeah, the pads are wherever they fit. It's like there's no kind of rhyme or reason to it. Like the pads in Toronto, for example. Yeah, if you're taking off on the 6s or even the 5, they're okay. But if you got to go back to 23, you're taxiing cross active runways, and or you're taxiing across runways, and regardless, and yeah, it can be a bit of a disaster. And if you're on the 33s, that's the time when you're putting on the 15s and 33s in Toronto, because they have to taxi cross active runway, de-ice, taxi back across to come back around and take off, and that can be when you're putting on multiple hours of de-ice of ground fuel. And yeah, that's the meltdown point for those guys in Toronto sometimes. Though I'm sure this winter will not be melting down anywhere.
No, there's no traffic. I mean, I'm sure LaGuardia will still muck it up somehow, but it'll be fine.
Yeah. So that's kind of.
We've had a couple snow days already, and I do recall Denver had one a couple weeks ago, and there were some pretty lengthy taxi times out of there, and it could be because it was the first snowfall of the season, but first approaching hour and a half, 2 hour taxi times.
Yeah, first snowfall of the season is usually kind of catches people by surprise because they're like, "Oh, is it going to do it? Is it not? I don't know. We'll release the people." It's just like the first snowfall when you're driving is when everyone's in the ditch. They'll forget how to drive in the winter.
I will say, here may be less traffic, but since a lot of the airlines have furloughed a lot of the junior people, the senior people now are going to be doing the de-icing, and they may not have de-iced in several years. So that may cause problems with staffing and having them have to relearn how to de-ice airplanes, which may cause delays.
Okay, so I can kind of answer this question from James. He's asking, is it the airline or the airport that makes the choice of what kind of de-icing fluid is going to be used, or the dispatcher or the pilot who makes the decision of what kind of de-icing fluid? And basically, it's kind of both. So the airport and the airline will set up a contract with the de-icer, and they will choose a specific Type 1 and Type 4 fluid. Like there's multiple different types of Type 4 fluid, like there's Dow UCAR ECG 106, and there's United Chemicals, and they make a Type 4. And each one has a different holdover time, so there'll generally be one fluid. But who decides what type of fluid is being used based on the conditions? That's going to be 99% of the time the pilot. They'll pull into the de-ice bay, call the de-ice guy, say, we need Type 1 and Type 4. We need Type 1 only. There has been a trial in Ottawa recently with Type 1 and Type 3. Or Type 2. So because the Type 4 it isn't always required, but Type 3 can give you better protection in less time. So yeah, it's going to end up being the pilot or the mechanics, the ground staff, who will decide what type of fluid they need. So basically, safest course of action. If the pilot says, I only want Type 1, but the ground crew says he needs Type 4, he's getting both. If the pilot says, I want Type 1 and 4, he's getting both. That's the way it works.
Yeah, and usually the holdover table tells you exactly what type of fluid you need.
It's based on the snowfall intensity chart that Mike was talking about with the weather conditions and the darkness and stuff.
Yeah, and it'll also say it also could be just the airline, because I know in our hubs, Acme, we de-ice ourselves. We supply our own fluid. We supply our own trucks. We just supply the own personnel to spray down the aircraft. So for us in the hubs, at least, it's we buy the fluid, we spray the fluid, we buy the trucks, things like that. It's all part of us. So that'd be the airline itself that does it. And this, there's many different types, and it's like, the smaller stations, it's going to be up to the station, or even still, the airline might buy the fluid and supply the fluid for their operations at that station. If they find that the de-icing contractor just costs too much, it might be cheaper to buy 2 trucks and train your people to do it. Also, talk about de-icing, a lot of things that happen quite commonly in the north, even when it's not snowing, is defrosting. And that's going through, and you can even pre-spray an aircraft. So if there's no active frost going on, and say it's just defrosting, then you can go ahead and really get get the Type 1 with a really long holdover time. And then, it's just, hey, the wings are clear, everything's good, there's no frost on the aircraft, and, you don't have to inconvenience the passengers of having to de-ice prior to departure.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, that also depends on if the airport supports de-icing on the gate and whatever. But yeah, frost spray. So that is the most common type of de-icing that happens in my experience is the frost spray, and that's basically if you've ever driven your car up where it can be cold and wintry when you go out first thing in the morning and it's sky clear and cold and your windshield is covered in that rime frost that you got to scrape off and takes forever. That is the type of frost that accumulates often on aircraft wings in these conditions as well, and that's what that spray is for.
Yeah. Hey, so do we want to move? Here's a question for us. Do we want to move on, or do we want to continue to talk about? I mean, we just ate up 20 minutes talking about de-icing. Do we want to keep this an ongoing little series of Winter is Coming and do Winter is Coming Part 2 the next episode and finish this up, or do we want to go ahead and plow through?
I could do. I think it actually would be a good series. I mean, we can talk next time about Arkham, which is.
I mean, because Arkham's going to take is going to be a while.
Yeah, I think that would be a good topic for next time.
Yeah. Hey, now we have three show topics in a row. Boom.
Winner. All right, so we're, Gregg has his daughter over, and we want to respect his time as well. And so, I mean, heck, it's been an hour, so we can cut it short. We don't have to do a 3-hour episode.
No, let's cut it short. I've been working all week and had to drive up to Edmonton and back, so that was sucky. Yeah, so we could hold that off. I'm fine with that. Do we want to talk about the feedback?
Yeah, we do. So let's go ahead and move on to feedback. I'm going to hit this right here. It's a really long fade out. All right, so I was on the Twitters earlier this week, and I had someone who just found the show, and he was asking about dispatch stuff and all of that. But then he also asked about commuting to and from work. And I'm not talking about driving 50 miles to and from work. I am honestly talking about, I live in Florida. Let's just say I'm old and I don't like snow or weather, and I'm going to live down in Florida, but my job is in Atlanta. And it's the very strange phenomenon that we have as an airline industry is you really don't have to live where you work, mainly because you have flight benefits. You can get on there as dispatchers. We can ride the jump seat, so that's another seat that we're allowed to go. With the merger that happened 11 years ago when we moved down to Atlanta, I still have colleagues that commute from Minneapolis down to Atlanta, and I go, why? But for them, they like living in Minneapolis and they just commute. And so they're gone from home 3 or 4 days a week, and then they're back. It's almost like they're pilots and they're gone, and then they come back and they commute that way, and they just have a small crash pad here. We had a dispatcher that's now retired. They lived over in Dallas, and he commuted from Dallas to Atlanta, and he found it more economical to just take his yearly schedule and go over to the Hilton over by work and book his days through the Hilton, and then he used all those hotel points for when they went on vacation. So, and he actually found it was cheaper to get the Hilton points and the stay at the Hilton than it was to have a small apartment that he rents. Have you guys ever commuted before?
No, I haven't, but I know of 2 people who have. Neither of them do it anymore. Though that being said, when I get older in my career, I might decide to live down in Mexico and commute. We'll see.
Gregg, have you commuted?
No, I have never commuted. But there's several of us in our office that do. A lot of people live out in Texas still from legacy airlines that commute up to to get to work on their 5-day break or whatever. They'll fly home, get a crash pad out in the city, and do that whole thing. I think there's actually some people in my office that commute like overseas. I think there was one guy who commuted to the Philippines on their days off. So that talk about a long commute, but yeah, that's not exactly my cup of tea.
No, I have commuted before, and I worked as a dispatcher commuting. When I first started, I still lived up in Chicago at home with my parents, and I commuted down to Memphis, and I had a small apartment down in Memphis, and I worked. A girlfriend and family and friends and all that were still in Chicago, and so I had the ability. So I flew home on. I worked a very early morning shift. I started at 3 a.m. So got started around 3, 4 in the morning, and then was off by 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And so I would get off of work and get a ride over to the airport, and I would go to Northwest, I would go to American, and I'd go to United and figure out who had the best wheels up time for Chicago O'Hare that day. And whoever had the best wheels up time is the company that I flew home on. Jump seated back and forth both ways, no big deal. And then in the inverse, I always took kind of a mid afternoon flight going down to work, so I can get down there early enough to get some sleep, or I would leave in the morning and give myself some options to get down there. Um, I will say this: I did not like commuting. Commuting sucked. There was this the stress and the impact of actually having to make sure you got on a flight, this a flight, that a flight. I remember one time I was sitting on the ground of O'Hare. We are numbered 1 for takeoff at O'Hare as I am watching a gust front come in, and I am watching this happen, and I see an airplane landing, and it's a I think it was a JL cargo, but I remember it was a whale, and he's about to touch down as the gust front was hitting, and his wings were getting all wobbly, and he ballooned a little, and I go, oh, this is going to be ugly. And so we're sitting there, and we choose not to take off because, well, the line of thunderstorms is right there. And so we sit on the ground, and we're waiting, and and I'm sitting there talking to the flight attendant, and I'm like, we're going to go back to the gate. I'm like, we're going to go back to the gate, and this flight's going to cancel. She's like, really? Don't say that. That's so negative. And I'm like, trust me, we're going to go back to the gate, and this flight's going to cancel, and I'm going to end up having to go home tonight. So what happens? We taxi back to the gate. Captain makes an announcement to make sure you take all your stuff off the aircraft. Bingo. Get out there. Canceled. Call my mom up and like, Mom, come back to the airport, pick me up. And it's one of those things where I was going to try to get down to work earlier because I knew of the weather. And it turns out I ended up going the next day and everything was fine. But man, yeah, commuting isn't fun. It's a struggle. It's doable. It's possible. People make it work.
It can be expensive too. Because if you, like, at least at airlines I've worked at in the past, if you are standby traveling, because they don't count dispatchers as commuters when it comes to, like, pilots, if you miss work because you were standby traveling, and that's what they would consider it to be for us, then you lose your travel benefits. So, yeah, that can be pretty expensive.
I shall go back
like,
to the book.
Yeah, so like I always have to make sure if I'm traveling standby, especially if I'm cutting it a little bit close to having to be back at work, I always make sure I have enough money for a confirmed ticket home, just in case.
I believe that we have a side letter in our contract when it comes to commuting, and I believe it's exactly like the pilots, and where it says if I believe basically you have to try for 2 flights, and scheduled to arrive at the airport at least 60 minutes prior to the start of the work assignment. So you're supposed to be down. You're supposed to be in the Atlanta airport 60 minutes before you're supposed to start your shift. And I think if you try 2 flights prior and they get canceled or whatever happens, then and you can't make it to work, it's not an excused absence, and they don't touch you. I mean, you made the effort to get here, and it just didn't work out.
Yeah, so, I think that's another one of those things where you want to be careful. And I know pilots do this too, and I couldn't imagine it if I was a pilot. But imagine You've been awake. It's an hour or 2 hour flight, whatever. You got to be at the airport an hour and a half prior, and now you're going to go work for 12 or 8 or whatever hours. You guys have less hours than we do. Like, how are you not fatigued at that point?
Yeah, it's got to be very tired. So at Acme North, in our dispatch office, there is no commuter policy at all. However, because of COVID and the reduced flight schedules, they came up with an agreement at some point a couple months ago that like a temporary thing that during COVID they'll be accommodating and similar to what you had in your CBA, but no long-standing commuter policy. So for people that do commute, it can be a headache.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure right now Acme's commuter policy is you book a positive space ticket. And if you were a commuter prior to all this COVID stuff, especially with the reduced seat caps and things that we have as an airline, right now I think our commuters are flying confirmed to and from work. So that's even it's a bonus for them that they get to do that.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. So, sum up: commuting possible, live wherever you want. I know when I was commuting to and from Memphis, I actually changed my address to say that I lived in Tennessee, because for a majority of the time the week I was in Tennessee opposed to Illinois, and that way I didn't have to pay income taxes. So, if you're into this and you really want to commute, I mean, you could live in a state that doesn't have an income tax, and then there you go. You're good to go and live somewhere else. Dispatcher Gregg walked away, so Fluffy the cat's back here. Oh, the crud! Here comes Gregg.
No, my powers on my laptop for some reason is starting to die, and I'm trying to figure out why. But go ahead.
Poor guy already can't pay the electric bill.
Zuri just wanted to say hi.
Please send your donations to the Flying in Life podcast, the furlough fund.
The furlough fund.
Yes, it'll get funded after the Buy Joe a new microphone fund.
All right, so that's gonna wrap up that in this episode. So I'm gonna come back to here. You can find show notes for this episode at flyinglife.com/2020/66. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all under the Flying in Life. Gregg is online at DXDude78.
78.
And Joe
Twitter,
is
on
online
Twitter.
at Facebook at Six Cats Press.
Yes, my book comes out on the 30th. I would love it if people would buy it. It has absolutely nothing to do with aviation.
We will be looking for samples of the book so we can review them as well.
Yeah, maybe get your wife to review it. It's a romance.
Hey, man, what are you trying to say? Yeah, I don't have a touchy-feely side?
No, I'm just saying that 2 reviews are better than 1.
All right, we'll be looking for that on the 30th. Opening and closing music is from bensound.com. Bumper music is from purpleplanet.com. And you can find the podcast on Stitcher, Google, anywhere. Remember, you can say, hey, play the Flying Life podcast, and I bet you it'll show up. Be that, hey Alexa, hey Google, hey whatever. So, all right. You guys got anything else?
Sorry, I don't understand.
There you go.
Thanks,
That's
Google.
hilarious. I love it.
Yeah.
Everyone
thanks,
stay
Google.
safe. We'll talk to you in a few.
Yes,
weeks.
please stay safe, especially if you're out in those areas where COVID's blowing up.
Yeah, it'd be Illinois, Wisconsin. All of the so we'll talk about this. Here's the Mike
And
Carroll.
actually, I'm actually going to Wisconsin on Sunday, just so you know.
Awesome. So here's the Mike Carroll's theory on that. In the South, here in Georgia, Florida, and all that, it all blew up in June and July, right? When it got hot and everyone went inside. Here in the North, it's starting to blow up because everything's getting cold and everyone's going inside. So there you go. That's my
I could buy
theory. That's my theory.
But you know what? Everyone go buy an airline ticket. Travel.
Buy airline tickets like you bought toilet paper.
That's right.
All right, we're gonna wrap this up. I will probably take that last little bit to the back. And one last question from James is: can you jump seat on a cargo carrier? Absolutely. I have not used the purple tail to get home or the brown tail to get home. But yes, you could jump seat on the cargo carrier. The bad news is the cargo carriers only operate at night, and then there's no really good way for them to get from where they drop their airplane off to anything to go ahead and connect to anything. It's not like they drop you off at the terminal and you can get picked up there. They drop you in the middle of the cargo area. And so, like, if your car is parked over in the terminal, you're going to have to take a cab to the terminal to get your car to move on there. But no, the cargo carriers are very good for jump seating. There's a yellow aircraft that's parked out in front that one of our dispatchers, literally, he calls it his ride home. He goes, "You see that yellow airplane up there?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "That's my ride home tonight." I'll go, "What are you talking about?" And it was a cargo carrier that flies up to Cincinnati because he lives in Cincinnati. And it's literally the airplane that he flies to and from work on because it just works out best for him and it's a direct flight and he always gets a jump seat on it. So it's like, well, good for you. So yeah, we love our cargo carrier friends. They're great. It's just a great thing about this industry too, because it doesn't matter who you work for. We all have people that commute. And so, it doesn't matter what airline. If you have jump seat privileges, jump on board and get to work or get home. Yeah. All right. So that's going to wrap it up. We're going to talk to everyone later, and we'll do our Halloween episode, and Joe will be happy. I'm going to dress up as a dispatcher for Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Greg's going to dress up like an Instacart employee.
I'm actually working as a dispatcher on Halloween.
You got a shift on Halloween?
Yes, I picked up an afternoon shift. Hey, you know what? When you need money, that will be my official last shift.
I don't knock you, and I'm glad you did. It just shows the idioticness of the whole situation that here you are picking up shifts on the 9th for the 31st, but right now you're not getting paid.
Exactly.
Thing of beauty. Gotta love it. Boy, am I glad I work for Acme. On that note, we're going to end the podcast. We're going to end the broadcast. And until next time, we'll talk to you all later.
Bye.